The city was alive with noise car horns blaring, vendors shouting their deals, and the endless murmur of people moving in every direction. Yet, amidst all this chaos, a single figure moved slowly, almost as if time itself had slowed down for her. Her name was Mrs. Eleanor Price, an 82-year-old widow with eyes that had seen decades of joys and sorrows, love and loss. On this particular morning she had stepped out to buy a few groceries for her small apartment, a task that now felt like climbing a mountain. Eleanor's back was slightly hunched, her steps careful but uncertain. Her hands clutched a plastic bag filled with bread, milk, and a small bouquet of flowers she had promised to place on her late husband's grave. Each step seemed heavier than the last, and her breath came in small, visible clouds in the crisp morning air. She tried to navigate the bustling sidewalk, but the crowd was relentless. People brushing past her with barely a glance. A young mother with a stroller barely noticed Eleanor as she squeezed past, muttering apologies she didn't really mean. A businessman, engrossed in his phone call, bumped into her without so much as a pause. Eleanor's heart sank a little with each encounter. She had never been the type to ask for help. Pride and habit had kept her independent all these years, but today, the weight of loneliness and fatigue pressed heavily upon her. She paused at the curb, trying to gather strength for the next stretch, when a bag tore slightly under the weight of the groceries. A loaf of bread tumbled to the ground, rolling toward the street. Cars honked as drivers narrowly avoided it. Eleanor's hands trembled as she tried to grab it, but her arthritic fingers fumbled. The embarrassment, the physical struggle, and the realization that she was invisible to everyone around her made her chest tighten. People passed by, eyes averted. A group of teenagers laughed and walked past without even acknowledging her. A delivery man darted by on his bicycle, leaving her momentarily stuck in a puddle of shadows and hurried steps. Eleanor felt tears sting the corners of her eyes. "Why does it feel like I don't exist?" she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the city's hum. She clutched the remaining groceries tightly, her body trembling not just from the physical exertion but from a deep, aching loneliness. And then, just as the despair began to weigh down her spirit completely, a young man appeared from nowhere. He was in his late 20s, wearing a simple jacket and a warm smile that seemed to shine through the morning gloom. He noticed Eleanor struggle instantly, not just the groceries, but the fear in her eyes, the quiet plea that had gone unnoticed by everyone else. Without a word, he stepped closer, bending slightly to reach for the loaf of bread that had escaped her grasp. "Here, let me help you," he said gently. His voice was calm, patient, and completely devoid of the hurried tone that defined the rest of the city. Eleanor looked up, surprised, her eyes meeting his for the first time that morning. There was a kindness there that made her feel seen, acknowledged, and safe, emotions she hadn't felt in what seemed like forever. The young man took the remaining bags from her hands with ease, and for the first time in hours, Eleanor felt the weight on her arms lightened, not just physically, but emotionally. A small smile broke across her face. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking with gratitude. I didn't think anyone would notice." He chuckled softly. "Some people do. You just have to wait for the right ones." And with that simple act, a chain of events began that would change both their lives forever and leave everyone else in the café frozen in astonishment. Eleanor's heart was still fluttering from the young man's sudden act of kindness. She had almost forgotten what it felt like to be truly seen, to have someone notice her struggle and respond with genuine compassion. The city around her was still bustling, yet somehow, the chaos seemed less intimidating now. With her groceries safely in the young man's hands, she felt a small, fragile hope begin to bloom. "Where are you headed?" he asked, his voice gentle but curious, as he carefully guided her across the busy intersection. Eleanor hesitated. She wasn't used to sharing her plans with strangers. Most people rushed past without even acknowledging her presence, and now here was someone genuinely interested in helping. After a moment she replied softly, "Just home. I live a few blocks from here. It's nothing special, nothing special," he repeated, smiling. Sometimes the most ordinary places hold the most important memories. There was a sincerity in his tone that made Eleanor pause. He wasn't being patronizing, and he wasn't asking out of obligation. This was genuine curiosity, genuine concern. Slowly she began to feel a connection forming, fragile but real, like the first light of dawn breaking through a long night. As they walked together, the young man introduced himself. "My name's Daniel," he said. "And you are?" "Eleanor," she replied, her voice soft but warm. "Eleanor Price." Daniel nodded. It's a pleasure to meet you, Eleanor. You know, it's rare to see someone struggling and still carry themselves with such dignity. You handled those bags like a warrior. Eleanor chuckled, a small, shy laugh that she hadn't heard herself make in years. The compliment felt like sunlight on her skin, warming something deep inside. They reached her apartment building, a modest, ivy-covered structure that had stood for decades. Eleanor fumbled with her keys, her hands shaking slightly. Daniel noticed immediately and offered a steadying hand. "Here, let me help you," he said, and she accepted. They stepped into the elevator, and for a moment, the silence was comfortable. No one else had paused for her today. No one else had asked how she was doing. Daniel's presence made her feel less alone in a world that had been moving too fast, too blindly. When they reached her floor, Eleanor invited him in. It wasn't something she did often. Her apartment was a private, quiet refuge, not usually open to strangers, but something about Daniel made her feel safe. As they entered the small living room, the smell of fresh flowers mingled with the faint aroma of old books. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on the floor. "You have a beautiful home," Daniel said, genuinely impressed. "It feels lived in, loved." Eleanor smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't just a compliment, it was recognition. Someone had noticed her life, her space, and her story without judgment. As they set down the groceries together, Eleanor began to talk, tentatively at first, about her husband, her life, and the quiet days she spent alone. Daniel listened intently, never interrupting, never rushing. His presence was a steady anchor, allowing her to open up in ways she hadn't with anyone in years. She spoke of loss, of lonely afternoons, of memories both joyous and painful, and Daniel, with his thoughtful questions and quiet empathy, made her feel as if her words mattered, as if her story deserved to be heard. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. Eleanor couldn't remember the last time she had shared so much with someone outside of her family. It was a rare, precious connection, one built on kindness, respect, and genuine human interest. And in that moment, she realized something profound. A single act of compassion had the power to transform an entire day, even an entire life. Daniel glanced at the clock and smiled. "I should probably head out soon," he said, though there was a hint of reluctance in his voice. Eleanor nodded, understanding. Visitors were rare, and yet, saying goodbye felt strangely difficult. Before he left, Daniel turned to her, said softly, "Eleanor, don't ever underestimate the power of small acts. Today, you were visible, and tomorrow, someone else might be the one to notice you. Kindness has a way of coming back when we least expect it." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you, Daniel, for everything." She paused, searching for the words to convey her gratitude. I don't know how to repay you." Daniel shook his head. "You don't have to. Just remember this moment, and maybe pay it forward when you can. That's enough." With a warm smile and a nod, he left, disappearing into the afternoon bustle of the city. Eleanor closed the door behind him, leaning against it for a moment. Her heart was full light, yet heavy with emotion. She realized that one stranger's kindness had not only helped her physically, but had reminded her that she was seen, valued, and not invisible after all. She walked to her window, gazing out at the city streets that had seemed so indifferent just hours ago. Somehow, everything felt different now. The world seemed a little brighter, a little softer, a little more alive. The next morning, Eleanor awoke with a lightness in her chest she hadn't felt in years. The memory of Daniel's kindness lingered like sunlight, warming even the quiet corners of her apartment. She brewed her morning tea, the steam curling around her face, and sat by the window, watching the city come alive. Cars honked, people hurried, vendors called out their deals, but now, the noise felt softer, more distant. For the first time in a long time, Eleanor felt a sense of hope, fragile yet persistent, threading through her day. She dressed carefully, putting on her favorite scarf, the one her husband had bought her decades ago. The scarf felt comforting, a familiar reminder that while life had changed, love and care still existed in many forms. Eleanor stepped out of her apartment with the groceries she had left for later, her steps more confident than the day before. Yet, despite the lingering warmth in her heart, a part of her wondered if such a perfect moment could truly last. After all, life had taught her to be cautious, to expect little and be grateful for even that. Her walk took her to the small neighborhood park, a place she had often avoided because it was usually crowded with busy parents, joggers, and teenagers absorbed in their own worlds. But today, She noticed things she hadn't before, the way the sunlight filtered through the trees, the laughter of children playing tag, the scent of fresh grass mixing with the faint aroma of street food from a nearby cart. Eleanor paused on a bench, feeling the cool wood beneath her hands, and let herself simply exist in the moment. It was then she noticed a young boy struggling with a kite, the string tangled in the branches above him. Children often frightened Eleanor with their loud energy, but this boy seemed small, fragile, and desperate. Memories of Daniel's kindness flooded back, and without thinking twice, she approached him. "Would you like some help?" she asked softly. The boy looked up, startled, and then nodded eagerly. Eleanor carefully untangled the string, her hands steady despite her age. The boy's eyes lit up with gratitude as the kite soared once more into the sky, dancing with the wind. "Thank you, ma'am," he called, his smile bright and innocent. Eleanor smiled back, feeling a connection she hadn't realized she'd been craving, a reminder that her experience, her strength, her compassion, could still make a difference. By midday, Eleanor had returned home, her spirit lifted and her heart lighter than it had been in decades. But life, as she was reminded, never truly waits. A knock at her door startled her. She opened it to find a small delivery package with no sender listed. Curious, she brought it inside and carefully opened it. Inside was a card that read, "For the lady who reminds us all that kindness matters, from a friend." Beneath it was a small bouquet of flowers, delicate and fragrant. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. She didn't know who had sent it, but somehow, the gesture made her feel seen once again. Later, as she sipped her tea, Eleanor thought of Daniel and the chain of events his simple act had started. It wasn't just about helping her with groceries, it was about noticing, acknowledging, and taking the time to care. She realized that even in a world that often seemed indifferent, there were people like him, and she had the power to become someone like him for others. The lesson was simple but profound. Small acts ripple outward, creating waves far beyond what we can imagine. Determined to carry forward this newfound sense of purpose, Eleanor began planning ways she could help others in her community. She decided to volunteer at the local library, help neighbors with groceries, and simply be more present in the lives of those around her. Each idea filled her with excitement and anticipation. Life suddenly felt full of possibilities rather than limitations. That evening, Eleanor stood at her window again, looking out at the city that had once felt so cold and impersonal. But now, with each passing moment, she felt a connection to the people around her, even strangers. Daniel's kindness had opened her eyes to the beauty in everyday interactions, the power of noticing, and the importance of taking even the smallest steps to help another person. A week had passed since Daniel's act of kindness, and Eleanor's life had begun to shift in ways she had never anticipated. She had started helping neighbors, volunteering at the library, and simply engaging with people she had once overlooked. Each small gesture brought her unexpected joy, a sense of purpose she had long thought lost. But nothing prepared her for what would happen on that seemingly ordinary afternoon. Eleanor decided to treat herself to a quiet afternoon at the corner café she had passed countless times but never entered. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee, the soft hum of conversation, and the warm sunlight streaming through the windows felt inviting. She clutched her purse nervously as she stepped inside, unsure if she belonged. The barista greeted her with a polite smile, and Eleanor returned it, her heart already feeling lighter simply by being acknowledged. She found a small table by the window and sat down. Observing the people around her, friends chatted animatedly, laptops clicked, and the world moved forward outside the glass walls. Eleanor ordered a simple cup of tea and a slice of apple pie, savoring the moment of solitude. She felt a sense of calm, a rare comfort in the midst of a busy city. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to simply enjoy being present. Her peace was interrupted by a commotion near the entrance. A young mother struggled with a stroller, her toddler crying loudly, while a man attempted to carry a large bag of groceries through the door. The crowd hesitated, unsure how to help. Eleanor's heart went out to them immediately. She remembered Daniel's words, "Small acts of kindness ripple outward." Without thinking, she rose from her seat and approached them. Here, let me help, Eleanor said firmly, smiling warmly. The mother looked surprised, the man grateful, and together they managed to get the stroller and groceries settled. The mother's eyes glistened with relief. "Thank you so much," she said. "I didn't know what I'd do without someone stepping in." Eleanor simply nodded, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. Helping others had become a natural part of her life, a source of renewed energy and connection. After ensuring the mother and man were settled, Eleanor returned to her table only to notice a familiar figure across the cafe. Daniel was there, sitting quietly in a corner, sipping coffee and reading a book. Their eyes met, and he gave her a small, knowing smile. Eleanor felt her heart swell. She hadn't expected to see him again so soon, and yet his presence felt comforting, as if fate had conspired to bring them together once more. As Eleanor sipped her tea, the cafe seemed to slow around her. Time itself felt suspended, the chatter and clatter muted as if the world recognized the significance of the moment. Daniel waved, and she returned the gesture, walking over to join him. They spoke softly, sharing stories and laughter, their connection deepening with each word. Eleanor realized that kindness not only bridged gaps between strangers, it created bonds that could transform lives. Then, something extraordinary happened. A delivery person rushed in, holding a folded piece of paper. He approached Eleanor and Daniel and handed it to her. Eleanor unfolded it carefully. It was a letter from the local community center, thanking her for her volunteer work and for inspiring others to help those in need. They had noticed her acts of kindness, how she had helped neighbors, shared smiles, and even assisted strangers like the mother in the cafe. The letter concluded, "Your compassion has reminded us all of the power of seeing and caring for others. You are a beacon of hope." Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes. She looked at Daniel, who simply nodded, silently acknowledging the ripple effect of that first small act in the city streets. Eleanor realized that kindness was contagious, capable of spreading far beyond what she had imagined. One gesture had not only lifted her own spirits, but had inspired others to step forward and care. As they sat together, watching the world continue outside the cafe windows, Eleanor understood that her life had changed forever. She felt a profound sense of purpose, a clarity she had never known. The ordinary moments of her days were now imbued with meaning, connection, and joy, and it all began with a stranger noticing her struggle and choosing to act. Eleanor woke the next morning with a sense of purpose that filled her chest like sunlight. The events of the past week, the young boy and his kite, the mother in the cafe, Daniel's kindness, and the community center's letter had transformed her life. She now understood, in a deep and unshakable way, that one small act could create a ripple effect far beyond imagination. Today, she was determined to continue that ripple, to see just how far it could reach. She began her day with a simple walk through the neighborhood. The streets were quieter in the early morning, the sun casting golden light on brick buildings and blooming flowers. Eleanor noticed the little things she had once overlooked: the neighbor struggling to carry her groceries, the elderly man sweeping leaves from his yard, the young girl trying to catch her runaway puppy. And for each one, Eleanor stopped. She smiled, offered a hand, or shared a few words of encouragement. Each act felt effortless now, each small gesture a thread weaving her back into the fabric of the community. She had once felt disconnected from by late morning. Eleanor found herself at the park again, watching the same kite-flying boy from days before. This time, more children had gathered, and Eleanor helped them untangle strings, taught them how to hold the kites steady in the wind, and laughed as they ran round, their giggles carrying through the air. She noticed parents watching her, some with curiosity, others with admiration. One woman approached Eleanor and asked how she had become so patient, so kind, and Eleanor smiled, realizing that even her example was inspiring others to act with compassion. Later, Eleanor returned to the corner cafe. It had become her little sanctuary, a place where she could witness the small miracles of daily life. Daniel was there again, this time with a notebook in front of him, writing quietly. When he saw Eleanor, his face lit up, and he gestured for her to join him. Their conversation flowed easily, filled with laughter, reflections on the week, and stories of the people they had helped together. Eleanor felt a profound gratitude, knowing that Daniel had been the catalyst for everything that had changed in her life. Then came the moment that would define the true power of kindness. The cafe door swung open, and the young mother from the week before entered, holding her child by the hand. Behind her were two more neighbors Eleanor had helped, carrying small gifts of thanks. Each person approached Eleanor, sharing how her guidance, her support, and her simple acts of compassion had touched their lives. Some offered flowers, others handwritten notes, and many brought words of encouragement. Eleanor's heart swelled with emotion. She realized that her acts, inspired by one stranger, had created a network of love and care, connecting people who had once walked past one another in silence. Daniel watched silently, his eyes reflecting pride and joy. He leaned over and whispered, "See what happens when someone steps forward. Eleanor nodded, tears streaming down her face. I never imagined it could feel like this, she whispered. Like the world is suddenly brighter. The cafe seemed to pulse with energy. Conversations slowed, the noise softened, and for a moment, it felt as if time itself had paused to honor this quiet, beautiful display of humanity. Strangers were smiling at one another, sharing stories, connecting in ways they had never before. Eleanor realized that kindness wasn't just an individual act, it was contagious, transformative, and powerful beyond measure. As the day drew to a close, Eleanor and Daniel stepped outside. The streets that had once seemed cold and indifferent now felt alive with possibility. Children waved, neighbors greeted, and the city, in its small corners, seemed to hum with warmth. Eleanor looked at Daniel, gratitude shining in her eyes. Thank you, she said softly. You changed everything for me. Daniel smiled. No, Eleanor. You changed everything by letting kindness in and then letting it flow outward. That's the real miracle. Eleanor understood. The world would always have its rush, its indifference, and its moments of loneliness. But it also had moments like this, moments where a single gesture could transform despair into hope, invisibility into recognition, and isolation into community. And now, she would continue to carry that torch, one act at a time. For you watching this story. Remember this, one small act of kindness can ripple outward, touching lives in ways you may never see. Just like Eleanor, we all have the power to make the world brighter, one gesture at a time. If this story has touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe to Kindness Tales Live, because stories like these remind us that even the smallest act of love can leave an everlasting impact. And maybe, just maybe, the next person you help will inspire an entire chain of kindness that changes more lives than you could ever imagine.